Well, thanks everyone again for joining us. We are Eco El Paso, and this is our 13th annual conference. We are a local 501c3 nonprofit here in El Paso, Texas, and we focus on sustainability. So anything from solar to electric vehicles to green building, green architecture, helping homeowners, business owners, and the city. And so we really want to educate, promote sustainability. And as a part of our virtual speaker series this week, we have one of our board members, Jonathan Macias, and he is going to talk to us today all about electric vehicles and a variety of programs and projects we have going on right now. But definitely wanted to thank Jonathan for his time today. If anyone has questions, you can come off mute at any time and ask your question. If you can't stay on mute throughout the presentation, but we'll definitely answer questions as we go. But again, my name is Shelby Ruff. I am the president of the board of directors for Eco El Paso. So if you guys have questions, you can email us at info@ecoelpaso.org. Go to our website, ecoelpaso.org. Check it out. We've got a lot of the information on there. We will be posting videos and presentations at a later date for this event, but I'll go ahead and pass it off to Jonathan and let you take it from there.
Thank you so much, Shelby. I really appreciate it. So, since we have the benefit of a relatively small group here, more of an intimate group, I welcome you guys to introduce yourselves and let me know what prompted you to join us this afternoon so that we can make sure you get the information. And then I'll talk a little bit more about, I would say, my EV activism in the community. So, Brianna, would you like to go first and just introduce yourself and let us know what brought you to today's session?
Yeah, sure. I'm Brianna. I'm a civil engineering student at UTEP, and I'm very, passionate about the environment and super interested in moving forward with sustainability and architecture and just in general. So my best friend actually is the one that let me know you all were having this conference.
Awesome, thank you so much. And are you looking to get an EV maybe after you graduate or sometime soon after all this craziness is over with the pandemic?
Yeah, I haven't thought too far ahead. I guess I'm just trying to get through school right now, but yeah, that would be something to look into for sure.
Well, that's good to know, and I'm happy to share a little more about kind of my journey. I actually used to work at UTEP, and they have a pretty robust network of charging infrastructure, which is, if you're a faculty, student, or staff, is always nice to have somewhere to take care of charging. So thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. And Floyd, how about you? I'm sorry, Kevin. I see you've got UTEP in your background too. What brought you today?
Yeah, I have got like 15-year-old Camry that I would like to replace at some point, and I would like to get an EV as the replacement. So I'm interested, like logged in today to learn more about it, and also I just feel like the longer I can hold out, that there's good stuff right on the horizon, and so seeing what the options are with waiting a year or two versus something available sooner.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I'd like to ask some clarifying questions only because I think it's funny. Some folks will make light of like the Tesla Model 3 and say that it's like the Camry of the EV world, almost as if it's supposed to be a jab. And I would say, how is that bad? Like, you have a rock solid car that will last as long as you, even if you don't do the maintenance, but that it will get you from point A to point B in a very comfortable way and the low operation costs. And also just solid engineering. So it's not, I don't think it's a dig at all. I think it's, if anything, it's something to aspire to. So that's good to know. Do you do a lot of road tripping right now or mostly commuting?
My wife has a hybrid RAV4. And so most of the time when we do any sort of long distance driving, we take her car. I'm basically just in town back and forth to UTEP. So I'm a hiker and birder, so I do like having some degree of being able to go on dirt roads. So
yeah,
and I don't know, I've seen some of I'm also 6'4", so I'm concerned about size. I know some, like the Leaf, I've heard great things about it, but I definitely would want to test drive one before pulling the trigger. But I've also seen some stuff with some like EV crossovers and things that are a little bit more off-road capable coming out, and I've seen like California has better models than are available here and different companies, so just learning what the options are. But yeah, the Camry, like you said, it's an it's like my dad's car essentially, but you know, I've put over 100,000 miles on it. It still runs fine. It's ugly. It's definitely beat up at this point, but yeah, it hasn't broken down, which is good, because I figure the longer I can wait, the better the options will be when I need to replace it.
Sure, that's a really good point. Well, when the time comes, I'm sure you'll at least be able to get some good money out of it for a down payment. But I'll keep that in mind, and I'm happy to share some of my EV journey as we kick off here, because it probably parallels very much, given that you and Brianna are at the UTEP campus, some of the investments that were made in coordination with the state grant for those blink chargers that we see on campus. So thanks again for joining. So let me just share a little bit more about myself and what brought me to be so much of an EV enthusiast. So the first thing we wanted to do is just cover what an EV is, and that stands for electric vehicle. The electric vehicles, they come in many different type of configurations. In fact, Kevin touched upon this earlier when he mentioned that he himself already owns a hybrid vehicle. And in some respects, that could even be considered a type of electric vehicle. The next tier from that would be a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which, Kevin, you might be seeing out there in the mainstream right now, where they have the plug-in Prius Prime, as well as the even a RAV4 Prime, which allows you to get anywhere from 20 to 40 miles of pure electric range, and which would allow you to address mainly your commute. And once you've expended the totality of the battery, it then goes into like a traditional hybrid mode, which gets you those very desirable 40 to 50 miles of miles per gallon equivalent once you're able to go into that hybrid mode. With EVs, most of the times, once we start talking about pure electric vehicles, they're going to be operating only with a battery and electric motor system, where that allows them to go and be utilized 100% for their mobility and charge periodically in order to get all the way across the United States, or even getting back and forth from your home to your work. My personal journey with EVs has been that I was very fascinated when I started working at the University of Texas at El Paso, and I noticed that they had these charging pedestals peppered around campus, but then realizing that they were part of an overall infrastructure and network. Because for me, one of the things that I was very curious about is that if I got an electric vehicle, where would I charge this thing? And in fact, a lot of the data shows that most people that have access to a charging station at home will use that as their primary method of charging. Now, we can talk a little bit more about the logistics of what does it mean when you live at a condo, where there might be some restrictions on what you can install in terms of vehicle charging infrastructure, as well as maybe if you live at an apartment community where charging stations might not be part of the initial design. But it's something that I will share is very easily added. It can be added as an amenity, and I think it's just a matter of us changing our focus. You'll see in other communities or in other states where they are leading the charge on sustainable mobility. These are part of the requirements, or even part of the infrastructure that is already thought about. And fortunately, unlike other mobility, it's relatively inexpensive to install these electrical lines that are the equivalent of about gas dryers, or 220 volts is what we're looking at. And now that's not to say that when we talk about the premise of electric vehicles that you cannot connect them to the same outlet that you would a phone or a computer. All it's going to do is adjust the amount of time that it takes for the battery to charge up, depending on how much voltage or amperage is coming out of that. So I always like to mention that, because some people tend to perpetuate or have this what's called range anxiety, which means that you can start your day fully charged, but then depending on where the day takes you, you might inadvertently end up stranded. So we'll get a little bit more into any questions that either of you might have with regards to electric vehicles, but let me talk a little bit more about the recently formed Rio Grande Electric Auto Association. So what I have up on screen right now is actually the navigation page for our landing site over at Eco El Paso. One of the things that we were very keen on doing as a result of our engagement with an event known as National Drive Electric Week is that we went ahead and we created our own affiliate related to the national, and actually it's a global electric auto association. So whenever you're at ecoalpaso.org, you can go into our initiatives and learn more about electric vehicles, and then find out more about the Rio Grande Electric Auto Association here. And what the Electric Auto Association is intended to do is to help folks just like Kevin that are interested in finding out more about what does it mean to drive an electric vehicle here in the borderland. So when we formed our chapter, we were considerate of the fact that we wanted to go all the way from West Texas, so going as far as the Marfa Alpine area, Van Horn even, since that's a major corridor where there are some high capacity chargers for both Teslas as well as a universal charging that's called a CCS charger that allows vehicles that have a higher capacity charging plug to be able to connect, and then you can continue onward with your driving. But so we go as far westward as Marfa, Alpine, and then we wanted to also be considerate about going into New Mexico. And I'm sorry, I meant eastward when I spoke earlier, and then going in the opposite direction in order to think about what is the infrastructure and what is the availability of charging even in southern New Mexico. I know some of y'all mentioned that you're into hiking or birding, so we want to be considerate of what does it mean when you want to go out to places with amenities like the Gilas, and would you be able to drive up there and even be able to come back down, or would you have to plan an overnight trip? Just given the considerations of the battery capacities. So I would encourage anybody that is at a point where they're wanting to just kind of cut through unless you really love doing all the research on your own, I would encourage you to maybe consider becoming a part of our affiliate and our local chapter, because our intention is to go ahead and build out more content very similar to what we're doing today and ask the questions as well as engage with local leadership so that we can start building out the infrastructure in our community so that range is not one of the considerations that prohibits somebody from wanting to get a vehicle. I think what you'll see in the next 5-10 years is that right now there's one brand that tends to get a lot of the attention, which is the Tesla company, and they do have a great portfolio of cars. They have really approached it from a perspective where they have invested a lot in the technology and trying to make the adoption as seamless as possible so that people don't feel constrained by the limitations of the range, but also at the same point providing a vehicle that works for everybody's budget. Now, I say that with an asterisk because a lot of these vehicles, just like any other newer technology, tends to be more expensive for the first adopters or the early adopters, I should say. But then once you start seeing what some of these vehicles are going for on the used market, if you're okay with 25 to 30,000 miles on a vehicle, you can definitely pick up some of these vehicles for the equivalent of what a new Toyota Camry would be, if not a little bit less. And because of the inherently lower amount of parts in the vehicle, they don't tend to be as complicated with regards to maintenance or well, not only maintenance, but also the amount of service scheduling that they require. So that's one other thing to keep in mind. I think one of the things that we all consider when we're looking at vehicles is that we think about only the monthly payment if we finance it. And maybe that even goes into account to consider insurance costs. But if you're really trying to get a whole perspective, it's better to look at the overall operational costs that includes fuel as well as kind of the maintenance and service schedules. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So I mentioned all of that because eventually what we'll start doing is through the Rio Grande chapter of the Electric Auto Association, we want to be able to push out these comparisons and also use our global network of information to allow you to get access to that educational information so that you can make the best decision for yourself. For future EV events, we will really be sure that we reach out to you. So if you signed up today via the link, or if you haven't, please go ahead and follow our Facebook page here, or reach out to us via this email address so that you can be added to our newsletter, and that way we can push out some of the content periodically. one of the things that I wanted to go back and mention with regards to the NDO, or the National Drive Electric Week event, is that last year we at Eco El Paso were the host for the event that convened a large amount of EV owners here in the borderland in order for them to come out and kind of look at the perspective full circle in terms of what does it mean to have sustainable energy, let's say on your rooftop, be able to fill up your vehicle, and then what are the kinds of different mobility options that we have. So we were fortunate in that we convened and we had all kinds of makes and models, and it was an opportunity for the community to come out and share their information about what they had invested in, and also to be able to see the various options. We had folks that had been early purchasers of Tesla Model S's, which are some of the early mainstream vehicles that were available, as well as multiple Model 3s, which is kind of the latest EV vehicle that's come out from Tesla. Second to what's recently been announced as the Model Y, which is Tesla's midsize or compact not RV, I'm sorry, but SUV version that gives you a little bit more space in the trunk or in the hatch area to be able to load up more items that you would need for moving and not be encumbered by a smaller trunk opening. So those are the kinds of things that we do. And unfortunately for this year, we went ahead and we did not have a National Drive Electric Week event, but instead we did work in cooperation with our local electric utility provider in order to do some cross promotion on similar content. And in the future, we look forward to making sure that we work together with them as well as other affinity groups so that we can get all the information out there. One of the things that I would like to highlight right now, if you're considering EV ownership, is that the local utility provider has actually passed the opportunity to have a dedicated EV charging rate, which means that if you are in a position where it makes financial sense for you to have a dedicated meter, which would only be utilized and connected to what's known as a vehicle charging station, that the rate for that electricity would come across as preferential and much lower than the typical rate. Putting out about estimated rates, I believe right now per kilowatt, the utility charges about 8 cents, not factoring for peak use or what have you. But if you're to be in a position where you could take advantage of this dedicated EV charging rate, it would be about 2 cents. So it's a significant amount, and it has some specific requirements for when you can use it and when you're able to access that rate. But of course, the ultimate idea is to get into a position where you have more sustainable options, even powering your own vehicle through, let's say, rooftop solar. Next thing that I wanted to cover is a little bit about just organically my EV adoption. So I mentioned that back in 2013, I decided that I finally wanted to take the plunge, and I went inverted. So I started looking around at what are the options for charging. And at that time, I was working for UTEP, and there were multiple charging stations over by the Union. I think it's on the Union East in front. There are 2 charging pedestals. And then in various decks or levels of the parking garages, there were wall-mounted units. And what I noticed is that these are part of a larger infrastructure of about 27 that had been peppered throughout the community, so that you have the ability to charge when you are out running errands, or we're at key locations such as the El Paso International Airport, which also have 4 charging stations. And now what we've seen about 10 years later, 10 to 12 years later, since they've been anchored and in place, is that like a gas station, there are different brands and different types of options. So those were the Blink charging stations, which have been up for a while, almost a decade. But now we're starting to see other options, such as the charge point stations that you may have seen over at the Whole Foods location on the west side. Now these, because they are installed on private property areas, they tend to be much less, much more accessible, I should say. And in some instances, they are also provided at no cost to the users of those shopping centers, or in this case, even the grocery store. So one thing that I think would be of high consideration, and maybe this also touches upon, Brianna, your interest in civil engineering, is just where are these located and how are they accessed? And one of my favorite apps that is a third-party app, they have an app and they have a web presence, is a site that's called PlugShare. And the reason I like it so much is that you're able to go and search based on zip code or based on city, and it will show you at a glance all of the stations that are out there. And then one of the other things that is nice about this as well is that there are groups of people that are willing to share their charging stations in case people are coming through and they are concerned that they might not be able to access any kind of charging infrastructure because the community hasn't invested in it. And so they will really try to help each other out. Again, focusing on this idea of enthusiasm related to EVs. So let's go ahead and walk through this app. And the reasons that I like it is that if for some reason, let's say you were a commuter that was coming in from Horizon each day, and you weren't sure, and you had invested in an EV that maybe has a lower cost to purchase or acquire of about $15,000 or less, and there are EVs that would fit that amount out there, but maybe it's a generation 1 or 2 technology, well, then you would want to know where you could go ahead and charge up each day. Now, I will say that, again, the majority of people that purchase EVs go ahead and make that investment of about $500 to $800 to get a dedicated charging station, of which can sometimes be wrapped into the vehicle purchase cost if you're doing it new, or it's something that you can work with your preferred electrician on in order to have that amenity installed at your home, so that you're able to leave each day with essentially a full EV tank of electrons, and then you're able to get to where you need to. But let's say you were living in an apartment community and you don't have the option, you could hypothetically take advantage of some of the charging infrastructure that is out here. And one of the ones that I would highlight here, and this is all crowdsourced, so you're able to see what the last encounters have been for people that are leveraging this amenity, is that they will tell you that it's been up, that it continues to work, which ones are working, and then you can even see photos. And so you'll see here that these are pretty highly rated charging stations. This is actually my vehicle here. And once you connect here, you're able to get up, if you're low on battery, you're able to get up to 80% of your battery in about 15 minutes or less. Now, for me, what that meant is I didn't really use this charging network too much, but when I did, I would leverage it when I was making my way out to areas like Van Horn or Marfa. And in my particular instance, I had a vehicle or electric vehicle that had a battery as a primary source, and then it had a backup engine that would only create energy in order to recharge the battery in real time so that it wouldn't fall down or it wouldn't run out of power, I should say. In that method, it allowed me to go almost 150 miles between the battery and the backup source. But some of the newer EVs will go 200 miles and beyond on pure electric. And examples of that might be some of these others here that I was looking at that looked like there was a Bolt, and that's Bolt as in with the B, and that's a Chevy product, as well as a Volt, which is another EV with a gas backup. So for now, let me just go ahead and pause and ask either Kevin or Brianna, if you guys have seen any of these charging networks out in the community. They take the various forms, and I'm wondering if you guys have even seen them on campus.
Yeah, I've seen a few of the ones on campus, and the Whole Foods, and I think the airport. That's probably been about it, but I can't say I've traveled that far to look around.
Yeah, and it's funny. What will happen is once you start looking or considering an EV, you'll start seeing them everywhere. Now, the way that these tend to be used, or the way that I utilize them, is that back when it made sense for us to be out and about, there are some entities such as the Fountains of Ferris that have invested as an amenity, and they don't charge you. And you'll see that they're located in the various garages or on the rooftop deck. So I would just connect when I was running around or out when I was having dinner, and then in about the hour that it took for dinner, or a little bit more, I would have about an additional 20 to 30 miles of range added to my vehicle. So that's kind of the idea, is that when you're out and about, you're able to take advantage of them. And you'll see here, somebody here with the Tesla is just topping off.
So one of the things I've noticed at UTEP is that often they don't really enforce that the parking spots are only for EVs. Have you seen that in any of the like citywide places, or are they usually pretty good about basically they're only for EVs?
So it varies, and that's a really good question. We like to joke as being iced. It's like you're being iced out of something. Eventually, I think what it comes down to is yes, it occurs, but it has to do with how there's what the signage looks like. And right now, I think when we were looking at the Faro location, they do have dedicated signage here. But what I've seen in other communities that makes it a little bit more obvious is that they will paint it green, almost like a lime or a neon green, and it'll say EV on the bottom of the parking space, and then there will be more call out. But yes, that definitely tends to happen. And in fact, when I was working at UTEP at the Student Union East, those would often be taken by vehicles that were non-EV. The only way that I could ensure that I could get a spot is that if I got there early, and then I just made it my own personal agenda to just leave my vehicle parked there, but with a note for any other EV owners that might need the space to give me a call. So trying to like help them in case they needed it, because I think there just needs to be a little bit more consumer outreach to understand why it's important to keep these available. I think that's definitely something that we can work with the various folks that have invested in the charging infrastructure through Rio Grande Electric Auto Association for us to teach people more about why it's important to keep access open. But yeah, that's definitely a good point.
I guess we'll have to create an Eco Paso sun visor.
Yeah, well, and it's like anything else, right, Shelby? I mean, sometimes, it just depends on what your personality is. But I've seen some people that leave some pretty direct notes about why they shouldn't be parking there.
No, that's a great piece of advice.
What's that?
That's a great piece of advice. Put a little note like, hey, I feel your pain. If you need me to unplug, give me a call. I'm inside eating or whatever, shopping. That's very courteous of you. I wish everyone had thought that way.
Well, and the other thing too is I try to do it in reverse. So I sometimes when I know that charging is limited in an area, but I know I really need it, what I'll do is there's some things that you can pretty much like cue into your fellow EV friends and say, you know what, when you're done or when you leave, do you mind just plugging me in? Because there have been instances where I would be wholly dependent on making sure I got at least a 50% charge in order to be able to continue with my journey, but I couldn't be watching the charging station over for an hour, not being able to do my own errands or my own work. And by and large, if you've ever experienced range anxiety, which is no different than getting to E on a traditional gas engine, you could know how angst-inducing and how anxiety-driven that is, that most people will help each other out and take care of each other. So let me just go ahead and start coming to a close, and I'll share a little bit more about the options that are out there. Kevin, you mentioned earlier the Nissan Leaf. I think when it comes down to how do you make your decision for what vehicle to get, my number one consideration that I would share with anyone that wants to get an EV is think about the use of your vehicle or what the vehicle will be utilized for. If you are in a two-car family already and you'll have a vehicle that can meet the needs of extended road tripping, that's not to say that you can't do it in an electric vehicle, but if you don't want to have to factor in that additional time for charging, you may very well be suited by maybe spending a little bit less and enjoying the advantages of driving electric, such as not having to go to the gas station anymore, being able to drive a car that's very nimble and accelerates very quickly, and then also just enjoying the driving dynamics at large that a low center of gravity in an EV has, and also the comfort, because they tend to be vehicles that have a significantly reduction in vibration, as well as very nice road manners. So anyways, getting back to my major point is, I would try to pick the vehicle that would fulfill the majority of your driving needs Monday through Friday, and then go from there. Because if there's no point, unless you just have saved up the money, there might be no need to go for a much larger battery pack unless you know you're going to be taking advantage of that maybe 1 to 5 times a year, depending on how and if you road trip. So one of the popular options I'm seeing more and more now is that if you go to sites like CarMax or Vroom or Carvana, and you pick up some of the original Nissan Leaf generations, you can easily pick up a vehicle for anywhere from $9,000 or less. And that's one of the reasons that I really like to encourage the Leaf purchase as one of the initial vehicles for anybody that might be a retiree and is looking to minimize their vehicle maintenance and operation costs, or even as a first-time vehicle for a new driver, because it's going to be so inexpensive to operate. Now, it is going to come with the limitation of maybe only having a range of 80 to 100 miles per charge. But most vehicles, if they are connected to those higher 220 voltage options, they'll take about 3 to 4 hours to charge them up to full once they've been fully depleted. And I know 80 to 100 miles doesn't seem like a lot, but in fact, the average commute for most Americans tends to be about 40 miles or less. So they've already worked in these buffers. Then there are other options like the vehicle that we were looking at and the vehicle that I have, which is the Bmw i3. And these vehicles are the ones that can get you anywhere from 80 to 100 miles actually 80 to 120 miles, depending on how you drive. And these are other great options. And they come also with the option of the range extender. The only thing that I would caution against the BMW brand is that they invested a lot on the front end when it came to the vehicle design and all of the engineering that they put into it. But there have been some reliability issues that have come up as a result of all that new tech. So if you're looking for something that might be a little bit more bomb-proof, then I would definitely be looking at some of the options from Chevy, whether you're looking at the Bolt or the Volt. And right now, the Bolt, like Lightning Bolt, are coming up to be pretty great deals on the used market as well as the new vehicle market, because they're getting ready to do a refresh of that particular vehicle. So you'll probably find some crazy deals out there. And that vehicle can get as high as a range of, I think, 220 miles per charge. Now, the last one that I'll share and why it tends to be so popular is, of course, the brand that we talked about earlier, which is the Tesla. And these vehicles are so popular not only because of the cutting edge design and what they have in terms of battery range, but the number one thing that people really appreciate is that they have a proprietary charging network, which is built into all of the vehicle's nav and will allow the vehicle to plot a navigation route that takes into account the optimal amount of charging that needs to be done from place to place. And what I mean by that is if you were to say that you wanted to go today, get in your car, hop in the car and go from El Paso to LA, you could go in here and it would tell you what are the estimated amounts of charging that you would need to do between here and your destination. And so just for example, and this is where Tesla has the competitors beat, because the other ones leave it a little bit more to chance in terms of the consumer doing the calculation versus the vehicle here is doing its own calculation. And what might seem like a lot of stops is actually a curated amount of stops for a very specific amount of time in order to only charge between the next destination and where it currently is. And all told, looks like this trip would take you, it probably add about two hours of additional charging time, but you get there with just the amount of energy that you need. So this is one of the reasons that not only the Tesla Model S's, but also the Model 3s are coming in so popularly, because they have a range of about 310 miles. And Tesla's latest long-range Model S now has a vehicle range of about 400 miles, which puts it on par with most gasoline tanks.
I have a question on that. So can you do it like, hey, I'm going to LA, but I want to do the fewest amount of stops to get me there fastest? Is this route set up for optimal charging, or can you switch it to like less stops but maybe I use, all 80% of my charge to get to the next stop. Can you do stuff like that? Or is it just sort of like a one-way route setting at this point?
It is in, go ahead.
Kind of like Google Maps, right? You can do like, scenic route, long route, quick route.
Yeah, it inherently is going to optimize so that you have the least amount of charging, which is why, let's say if you're leaving El Paso with a full charge here in this example, it's telling you that you only need to charge for 10 minutes in Deming. And then between Deming and you can get almost all the way to outside of Tucson. And once you're in Wilcox, it's going to want you to charge 30 minutes.
Yeah.
The thing that we won't necessarily get into today with vehicle charging is that there's a sweet spot that the battery likes to stay in, and it's really between 20% and 80% of the battery, and that's just because of the chemistries of the chemistry related to the batteries and why it likes to live in that range. And the reason I mention that is because when you go on a road trip, you can tell the vehicle, like the Tesla or some of the other ones, that you're wanting it to charge up to 100% so that you have the most amount of battery left. And then when you're just doing your day-to-day commute and you're driving, you can tell it to dial back and say, don't charge more than 60% because I know I'm not going to be needing that amount of battery band. It's very similar to the way that our cell phones work. And that's why one of the reasons there's an optimal way that you should be charging your cell phone so that you can have the longevity of the battery instead of waking up every day and having 100%, because that's not necessarily what we need. So, but good question, Shelby. I appreciate it. So I'll start coming to a close and just share, like, these are the kinds of technical things that we look forward to sharing with you. There's a large group of EV owners in El Paso that have already gone through the headache of worrying about some of the charging infrastructure or knowing which electricians or maybe even full electrical renewable electricity suppliers that you can work with if you want to get solar and make this a whole part of your renewable lifestyle. And those are the kinds of things that we hope to impart and be rolling out a little bit more in the new year. We just had a little bit of an offset start here because of the pandemic, but we look forward to coming strong and creating a more series like this, as well as posting them to our site.
Nice.
So feel free to check us out. We are, you can go and find us either at ecoelpaso.org, or if you'd like, you can go to RGEAA.org as well, and that'll take you directly to our landing page over on Eco El Paso's.
Nice.
So just two quick URLs to remember.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, check out the website. It's got an EV page just dedicated to information. It's also got a lot of details on our EV page about El Paso Electric specific charging network locally. I highly recommend, if you have or plan on getting one, that PlugShare app is a must-have. And then follow us for our yearly event for National Drive Electric Week. That's going to be fun, bigger every year. 2021 will be our 3rd annual, and so hopefully we'll get hundreds of cars out there. And I do want to highly encourage people. I think it was mentioned, but Google used electric vehicles. Google used Teslas, used Bmw i3s, used Chevy Bolt and Volts. You'd be very, very surprised. If you're thinking about getting your 16, 17-year-old their first car, I mean, you can get a $10,000 to $20,000 electric vehicle or a hybrid. Even if they started at just a hybrid level, not just a pure gasoline, you'd be very surprised how many used options there are. And I also want to echo and second the, get a quote for solar, right? If you're going to get an electric vehicle, get a quote for solar too, whether you look at it purely financially or through the environmental impacts. Both solar and EVs are a no-brainer when you look at total cost of ownership that Jonathan was talking about, right? Factoring in all the fluids, brake changes, oil changes, tire, everything, right? And you compare it to an electric vehicle, it financially by itself alone, without the environmental impacts, is worth it. And if you're like me, where the environmental impacts are very important, you get the best of both worlds. So contact us at info@ecoelpaso.org. Go to our website, ecoelpaso.org. Please donate. We are an all volunteer nonprofit. Jonathan and myself were board members. I'm the president of the board. Jonathan's the president of the Rio Grande Electric Auto Association, which is a part of the Eco Paso chapter. But if you have questions, email us, call us, get us on Facebook or Twitter, LinkedIn, or YouTube. We do have a YouTube channel. We will post all these videos. And if anyone has questions, hopefully we can see you at next year's event. And Kevin, hopefully we will see you rolling up in an electric vehicle. But thank you to Kevin and Brianna today for your time. Before we go, do you guys have any last minute questions before I end the session today?
There we go. No, thanks, John. That was excellent. I was wondering, like, how is the service right now? I know like EVs are still kind of a small part of the market. Is it mostly going to dealers, or are there any independent? I know it's less maintenance, but what do you do when you need something done?
Yeah, so I can speak to that from 3 different brands. The first one is when I had my Nissan Leaf. That Nissan did a big push to make sure that there was a technician in every major city. And in fact, I think at all 3 of the major Nissan, there are at least 2 in El Paso that had technicians, and they were always able to take care of everything that was needed. I never had any kind of major fault or malfunction with the battery system or with the drivetrain units. I think the craziest thing that I had with my Nissan Leaf was that at the factory, it had an interior leather panel on the door, and there was also a cloth option, and 3 of them had leather and this one had cloth. So that was just more of a manufacturing issue that they fixed right away. And unfortunately, I did run out of electricity one time, but the tow truck was sent and got there within 15 minutes. And they gave me the option saying, do you want us to take it to a charging station, your home, or to the dealer? And because it was due for a recall, I just had them take it to the dealer. But they were able to take care of it, and it was never down for more than 2 days. And the same thing in Las Cruces. They also the Nissan dealership there as well has the required technicians. And then with my BMW, you'll notice that a lot of the dealerships will market what they have, but if you ever see it's an I logo, it's very similar to like their M Sport cars, which is like their really high performance division. And so the BMW dealership here recently went through a major renovation, has a new ownership group, and they too invested in technicians that can provide the maintenance for the BMW i3 as well as the i8. And one of the things is if those vehicles, if you're drawn to them, is BMW is going in an interesting direction where instead of having dedicated EV cars, they're integrating more of the technology into the mainstream cars in such a way that they're making them plug-in hybrids, or they are designing them from the get-go to where they will continue to have the traditional combustion engine, a hybrid system, and then maybe a full EV option, like we saw with what's going to happen with the X3, which is their SUV. But for whatever reason, they decided not to bring it to the United States this year. And then for Tesla does have a service center here in El Paso, and they have 2 varieties. One is over, I think it's off of James Watt, near where the UPS delivery station is, and you can go and drop your vehicle there. They'll do all the necessary maintenance. But the neat thing that is really changing consumer expectations is that Tesla also does a Ranger program where they will just, under warranty or under typical service, will just send a mechanic or technician out to your home, and they'll do most of the maintenance by the street or in your driveway. So it spoils you, right? Because there's not much to do, but the things that do get done, they can do things like rotating tires, and taking care of other kind of issues that might be related to the onboard cameras or what have you. So yeah, we're fortunate that our city is able to have those amenities. And I think the Tesla Rangers here cover as far north as like Silver City, and they'll go all the way out to Alpine. So it's a pretty big region for them.
And
yeah, good question.
And you do find charging stations at interesting places like Rudy's Barbecue and random hotels and random Walmart. So sometimes you can even take advantage of it, right? If you are on a road trip, there just happens to be here on the west side, Rudy's Barbecue has, I don't know, 5 or 10 Tesla charging stations right in front of it. So whether you're at the hotel or you're at the Rudy's, pull in, eat lunch, and leave with a full tank. So
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Shelby. But Kevin, definitely take our contact information, and you're welcome to email us. And if you have any questions, feel free, and Brianna as well. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised when you hear friends or family if they're considering these things. And it's just nice to have somebody that's already been there, so you don't have to worry about answering these questions or taking it from people on the internet, which may not be as well informed.
yes. And this year we didn't have a physical National Drive Electric Week Festival, but we did have a virtual speaker series. So if you go to our YouTube page, there are 4 videos. And one of the individuals is actually a detailer here in town too, that actually drives an EV. So he like digs into them all over the place, and he gives you some good advice, even on how to maintain the quality of them on the outside. But there are, I think, 4 videos that are about a half hour to 45 minutes each, just dedicated to people that own EVs. And one of them owns multiple, I think 3 EVs with solar on his roof as well. He's on his cell phone walking around on his roof live. So it's a really good session with Tony Reyes. Jonathan is one of the speakers too for that event. But take a look. Again, email us, show up to our events when you can. Join the association. We'll send out emails for Rio Grande Electric Auto Association. And then also sign up for our newsletters, because we do send stuff out from time to time. But yeah, if you guys have questions, thank you for joining us. And we will have probably another 10 speakers this week and next week. And so if you're interested, join us.
Yeah,
Shelby,
stay safe out there, folks.
I was just going to ask, Shelby, do you have anyone talking about the Million Trees initiative you guys are doing?
Yeah, I just finished that, but I do have a full presentation that I'm going to add to our website. Right now on our website, there's a pretty good idea of what the program is. It started out for low income homeowners and communities, but it's going to expand out to partnering with real estate agents who maybe they give away a tree with every house they sell. And then we want to get with title companies and banks that are giving out loans. Maybe they can donate a tree. But the whole idea is native trees here in town. But right now we do have a website dedicated. You can actually sign up if you want to be a volunteer, or if you want a tree and want to pull your community together, let me know. You can be a tree advocate, and I'll bring you into the process.
Yeah, I'll look into it. I'm the botanical curator at the gardens here. So I just took over in January from John White, if you knew him.
Oh,
so I'm definitely like big push on getting more native plants out into the community. So
yeah, poster in the background. I've got one of the new color ones in here in my office. Yeah, cool. You probably know more about that way more than me. So yeah, if you don't mind, send me an email to the info@ecoelpaso.org. And I'd like to pick up with you. Maybe you can help us with that program and make sure we're spinning the right message to the public and using all the right information. So
cool, we'll do.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Brianna. And there, again, like I said, 10 more events, and hopefully we'll see you at those as well.
Thank you. And where did you say that Million Trees, I could find more information on that?
Just go to our website, ecoelpaso.org, and underneath the initiatives, there'll be a Million Trees El Paso tab you can click on. And then we have a separate Facebook page and a Facebook group as well for people that want to have more in-depth conversations.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jonathan, again. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Of course, anytime.
Thank
you
you
all
guys.
stay safe.
Yeah, bye-bye.